Hi, this is Krista Welsh.
Hey, this is Daniel Arthur Smith.
Hey, this is Terry R. Hill.
Hey, it's Josh Hayes, and you're listening to
30-minute author interviews
with my friend Preston Lay.
Woohoo! Hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode of 30-minute author interviews. We do have a giveaway with this week's episode, but before I tell you about it, I'd like to tell you about our sponsor, The Galactic Satori Chronicles by Nick Breaker and Paul E. Hicks. The Galactic Satori Chronicles, a thirst for revenge sends one man on a deadly journey through the galaxy in this adrenaline-pumping new series. Asher is a young man whose world is turned upside down when he discovers that his fiance's death has been directly caused by an imminent alien invasion. In a desire to better understand humans in order to destroy them, these aliens are projecting their consciousness into unsuspecting men and women, and in the process are learning exactly how to use humanity's own selfishness and greed as weapons against them. Fueled by emotions that the aliens will never understand, Asher bands together with a group of friends. These four MIT co-eds are more than meets the eye and go to battle with those who are intent on destroying our planet. Asher takes the fight from Earth to an alien spaceship and then to the very planet of the enemy trying to destroy them. The Galactic Satori Chronicles can be found on Amazon, where Book 1 Earth is only 99 cents and Book 2 Kron is $2.99. Head on over to Amazon and search for Galactic Satori Chronicles, or head on over to Leigendarium.com and check out the show notes for this episode. In the show notes, we will include a link where you can find both Book 1 and Book 2 on Amazon. This week we are joined by Jody Wenner, and she is going to be giving one person the chance to win a signed copy of each of her novels, Leaving a Mark and Painting the Lake. Jody has also hand-crocheted a penguin wearing a sombrero, and the winner is going to receive that as well. What do you need to do to get registered for this giveaway? It's simple. Head on over to Leigendarium.com, find the show notes for this episode, and comment in the comment section with what your favorite part of the episode was. Now enjoy our interview with author Jody Wenner. Welcome, everybody, to this week's episode of 30-Minute Author Interviews. This week, author Jody Wenner is joining us. Thank you for taking time out of your day and coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Not a problem. Here at 30-Minute Author Interviews, we like to start each segment or each interview with a segment called Two Truths and a Lie, where I can maybe get yours right. I keep saying I need to go back and count. I think I've lost more than I've won. But can you tell us two truths and a lie about yourself and see if I can figure out the lie?
I sure can. Okay, so the first one. I once played blackjack with Jack Black.
Nice.
Number 2. I once saw a film starring Winona Ryder while sitting directly behind her in the movie theater.
Okay.
And the third one is, in the early 90s, I worked at Paisley Park as an assistant to Prince.
Wow. Okay. Man. I always say there's some kind of reasoning, even though there's not when I guess on these. Mm-hmm. And this one's just going to be a complete shot in the dark.
Okay.
I like the wordplay of playing blackjack with Jack Black. That's pretty awesome. But I'm going to say that the Jack Black one is the lie, just because it's a fun play on words.
Well, you're not right.
Dang it.
That is the truth.
Really? You played blackjack with Jack Black?
Yep. Say that fast 10 times.
Exactly. I don't think I could.
I know.
It's hard saying it once.
I know. It was hard writing it out, actually, because I was like, I got to type these out so I can remember. And I was like, wait, no, Jack Black, wait. Yeah. So I did. I played. He came into town, and I'm from Minnesota, and his band was touring. And I don't know if you know, a lot of people don't know that he plays in a band called Tenacious D.
Yes.
And I worked at a bar that some friends of mine owned, and we had a weekly poker game at like upstairs, like the staff. Mm-hmm. And after the show, he came by because I don't know why exactly. He was friends with, I think, some of the people, and he joined our weekly poker game.
That is awesome.
Yeah, it was very strange.
So is he as cool in person as he seems to be whenever you see interviews or films that he's in?
He wasn't quite as personable as I would have expected based on some of the interviews and things that I've seen. But, I think it was a weird situation. He had just gotten done performing and he didn't really know a lot of the people. So, he was more quiet than I think that you would have expected him to be. Yeah.
Okay.
But, yeah.
So which one was the lie?
So the lie is I never worked with Prince at Paisley Park. But I do know some people that have, obviously being from Minnesota. Most everyone you come in contact with has some sort of Prince story. So, yeah.
That's why I didn't pick it.
Right, exactly.
So
that's why it was the trick.
So you also sat behind Winona Ryder during one of her movies.
That's true.
So so was it a premiere or did she just happen to be there?
So when I was in college at the University of Minnesota, I worked at a movie theater. And she actually came in to see one of her own films. She was dating Dave Pirner at the time, who is the lead singer of Soul Asylum, and they're from Minnesota.
Okay.
And so they both came in. And I actually wasn't working that night. I had just gone in to see the movie. And it was Little Women, by the way.
Okay.
And it was playing, and I, for whatever reason, I went to see it, and so it was kind of strange because I was sitting like 2 rows behind her.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. But I had a lot of actually, strange encounters with different celebrities coming in to see movies at that theater. Like when Fargo was being filmed, the original Fargo was being filmed, I actually sold a ticket to William H. Macy, who came in to just see a movie.
Right.
Yeah, so strange things like that, but
that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
That's very cool. Well, for my listeners that might not know who you are or what you do, can you kind of give them a bio on who you are and what you do?
Sure. So I basically started writing in high school. I think I say this in a lot of the bios that I have. I had sort of journalistic aspirations. I wanted to, write newspaper. And, but then when I started college, I kind of realized I think I want to do the more creative side. And I went into more marketing and communications, and that's what I did for work. But I started really doing creative writing on the side, and probably mostly through my 20s, I had written some short stories and things, but they were really, really, really bad. And I think the reason was because I hadn't read enough. So I started to sort of step back from writing, and I started reading a ton, and I just really sunk my teeth into reading. And I really got interested in dystopian and science fiction. And I went to, and this was like well before it was really trendy. This was like early 2000s. And I went to the library, and I checked out, I did a search, and there were literally at this point like 15, 20, sort of classic. They were like 50s, 60s. I read every single one. I checked them all out. I read Mechanical for Leibowitz. I read I Am Legend, On the Beach, Alas Babylon, The Earth Abides, The Postman, Ridley Walker, just some really obscure sort of dystopian, kind of apocalyptic, I didn't even think dystopian was really much of a word then, but,
right.
And I got really interested in it. And so I thought, I'm going to try to write something along these lines. And it was just sort of bad timing because it was starting to be that point where I think at that point, The Hunger Games was just coming out, and it was getting more and more trendy. And so I was like, oh, I can't really compete with, because I I started writing YA dystopian, and I was thinking to myself, this is a good place to get my feet wet because it's lighter fare. You know, it can be more I don't know, just I was thinking I was going to write for teenagers. And when the Hunger Games came out, it was a little bit more like, no, this is actually supposed to be kind of for everyone. And so I don't know, it wasn't good either. My first few attempts. So I think I wrote like 5 or 6 things and put them aside too. And then I realized, okay, well, and because I was kind of writing at that point for, like my grandma and the neighbor lady, it wasn't like anyone was really reading it. And they turned out they didn't really like young adult dystopian, nor did they know really what it was. So I thought, well, I'm going to start now. I'm ready, I think, to write some adult stuff. So for whatever reason, I jumped into mysteries. And I think it was just because I like the relationship aspects of writing and just kind of really the character driven stuff. And so I thought, well, mysteries have that, that kind of nitty gritty. And I also just kind of wanted to see, like, can I actually write a mystery? I'm not sure. So that was my first. So once I figured out, yes, I think I have a mystery in me, then I was like, well, maybe I can do some more. So that's kind of where I am at. But when I do short stories, for whatever reason, I still stick with my sci-fi roots because I really still, one of these days, and actually what I've started working on recently is sort of a science fiction mystery. So we'll see how that turns out. I don't know.
So was there any author or anything that you read that you're like, you know what, I think I really do like mystery and I'm going to try writing it, or did it just happen?
It's kind of weird because I actually don't really read mysteries.
Really?
No. I think that's good though, because I think then you don't really follow that standard format. You don't have all of these preconceived notions of what the mystery is supposed to really be. I don't know. So
that's funny. I remember, so I've told several times when the way I got into reading is, the girl I was dating at the time, who was now my wife, was like, you should really read. You should read Harry Potter. And so I think there were only like 4 books out when she had me read Harry Potter. So I read Harry Potter, but then after that, I discovered James Patterson. Mm-hmm. And so I read everything that I could by James Patterson. Well, then it just got too much because he's putting out a book, it seems like, every other week.
Right.
So
yeah.
I was into that mystery thing for a while, but then I went back to young adult books for a while also. So the way I discovered you, I'm sure you know, but my readers don't know, is earlier this year we did a flash fiction challenge, and we get there's a prize pack to the winner that won a prize pack for the winner that included cover art, formatting, editing, sketches by Ben Adams, and you actually submitted a story. And I remember as soon as I read it, I sent you a message. It was my pick to win. I voted every day for you. You could vote for 3 stories, and yours was one of the 3 I voted on every day. And your story was called The Hitch. Can you tell the people that maybe haven't read it kind of what your story The Hitch is about without spoiling it, and then what was your inspiration for The Hitch?
Yeah. I knew you were going to ask me what my inspiration was, and this was sort of a funny one because how sometimes things happen when you're not really thinking too hard about them, and it's just like it'll just hit you in a quick flash of an inspiration, and you just sit down, and then the words just kind of magically appear. That was the case with this one. It was like I hadn't really planned the story out. I just sort of sat down and went from start to finish, and that's what kind of came out. It was just, I don't know. I didn't really it didn't come from anywhere. It wasn't like, oh, there's this thing that happened that makes me want to write about. It wasn't the case. It was literally just one day I sat down and I started writing, and that's what happened. So I don't know exactly where it came from but it's about a man who is going to pick up his kids for the weekend, and he's driving along a long stretch of highway that's, in my mind, a very sort of mountain-esque, deserted, maybe like, I don't know, sort of desert land or something. And anyway, it's starting to look like it's going to storm, and he sees a hitchhiker on the side of the road, and she looks very non-threatening, a little petite thing. And so he decides that he's going to give her a ride. And right from the get-go, he realizes he's made a big mistake, because she's got a bag, and she basically says, do not ask me any questions about this bag, and just let's go. Mm-hmm. And she basically kind of takes control. And so, yeah, I don't know. And then strange things happen from there. I don't want to give away anything else, but yeah.
It was such a cool story. I loved it as soon as I read it. At first, I was just like, please be less than 1,000 words, because I plug the story in and do a word count on all the stories that get submitted. And I was just like, because there's a lot of dialogue back and forth, so it seems longer than what it is. And I was like, oh, please be less than 1,000 words. And it was. I was like, yes. So, yeah,
I think maybe just like 2 or 3 though. Close. Yeah.
Was it hard writing a story in 1,000? Because I've never done it. Is it hard writing a story in 1,000 words?
I think I actually cut it to, I think it was like 2,000 words. And then when I saw your word count, I was like, oh, I'm going to have to make this shorter. But I threw it out a couple of my good writing friends, and they kind of helped me figure out what to take out. And so there are a couple different variations on the story. Yeah. But I don't know. I think I maybe packed a little too much into the 1,000 word counts. Yes, because I think that is hard for sure. But
do you think you'll ever continue the story or put out a longer version at some point?
I don't know. It's kind of funny because I had asked on Facebook, like, does anyone want to read this and give me a little feedback on it before I submitted it to you? And I got like, I don't know, 5 friends or something. And one of them was my aunt, and her feedback was, oh, I can't wait to find out what happens when you write the rest. And I was like, no, this is a short story. It doesn't go anywhere else. She's like, no, I think it needs to. But I'm like, well, the way I ended it, it sort of ends. Like, I don't know. I'm sure it could go somewhere else, but.
Yeah, it's one of those that it's good the way it is, but if you left it to where if you wanted to, you could. So yeah. So I have to thank you for entering, because I don't know if I would have discovered you without that contest. And that's one thing I love about doing this podcast and running the blog, is I get to meet authors through maybe some of the weirdest ways. Thank you for submitting that story. I know it didn't win, but it was. I know,
way to rub it in. Yeah,
it was
listing
my favorite,
all the great prizes. Oh, yeah.
It was my favorite, though.
Thank you. So. I appreciate that. But no, and I think that it was really fun, and I'm kind of upset that I didn't see the one that you had run the year prior, or sometime prior. You had done another one, right?
Yeah, it was. It's something I want to do on a yearly basis, but time just got away from me. So it was about maybe close to a year and a half before. And that one, I always try to get some prizes that will get writers antsy to want to write. So the first one I ran was editing by, who was it that was going to do editing? For some reason, I'm thinking it was David Gatewood, but I don't think that's right. But I had Michael Bunker would do a blurb. Kim Wells would do a book trailer. What's the guy's name? Covers by. I had a cover and then an editor. and it was a good prize. And then this year was a good one too. So
same. Yeah, for sure.
I'm hoping to do it again in a year and make it kind of an annual thing. I mean, it gets a really good turnout. It was a lot of fun. Yeah, there's a lot of views, and and like I said, every year there's people that submit that I've never heard of before, and completely surprised me, and that was your story. I know as soon as I read your story, actually before I sent you a message, I went and bought all your books, the two that you had out after I read that story, because I knew that I would just love your stories by the way that you wrote.
Well, I don't know. I think that sometimes, short stories are fun just because you can really just do whatever, it doesn't have to be really a format, and it can be, I don't know. Like I said, I like to do science fiction short stories because I think that you can just go. And actually, I did. I enter a lot of science fiction, specifically contests, just because I have all of these little short science fiction stories. But I entered this one, and it was really, really hardcore science fiction writers, and they critiqued each story as it got posted each day. I mean, they went hard on all of the stories. And really? I think mine was like in the second or third round. And by that point, I was terrified. I was like, oh, no, I don't even think I want this to happen anymore because, and yeah, they just shredded it. I mean, it was awful. They picked out the one typo I had, and it was really, really bad. And wow. I'm actually sort of surprised that I have ever submitted anything again after that one, but well.
You should keep doing it. Just don't submit to that one group again.
Exactly.
You'll have to start prepping your next one for whenever I do another one.
I know, right?
And you should release your short ones in like your own little private anthology or short story collection.
I've thought about that. Yeah. I think I need like 5 or so more. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, your latest novel is called Leaving a Mark. Before we kind of talk about that for a minute, can you let our listeners know the, non-spoiler book blurb on what Leaving a Mark is about?
Mm-hmm. It's about kind of a lot of things, but it started out as a question that I posed, which is if you were someone who had been born with a facial anomaly like this main character, which was a birthmark that was on her chin, when you grew up, would you decide to have it removed, or would you leave the mark? And the reason that came about was because I actually was born with a birthmark, and that cover of the book is my actual photo.
I was going to ask you if that was you.
Yeah. And I guess I've just thought about it a lot because I did not have the chance to decide one way or the other, because mine actually ended up being precancerous and the doctors made the decision for me. But it was an interesting thought, would I leave it or would I have it removed? It is very, part of what made me who I was. It was something that really had, gave me character. Mm-hmm. Or made me stronger, probably when I was in elementary school, and kids, could be cruel. So, but as you grow up, it becomes more of this doesn't have to be there. And so do you leave it or do you get it removed? So that was part of it. And so, of course, when I started writing, it was a little bit like, well, it kind of came out autobiographical. I mean, it's the story in and of itself. There's this mystery aspect that is very fictitious that I completely made from scratch. But because I started writing with this character that was essentially me, I thought it would be fun to throw in a lot of actual little tidbits of my family. And we had kind of an interesting, some different interesting family things that happened. So I really thought it would be fun to throw some of those things in. And so I knew I wanted to write something about my grandpa because he was just a character in real life. He was in World War II, and he came back, and he had severe PSTD. What they call it, shell shock back then. He was shell shocked, and so he basically became an alcoholic, more or less, and he ran his own mechanic shop gas station. And so I kind of incorporated him into the story. And at the same time, he had this sort of lie that he was living when he came back. And I don't want to give that away because that's part of the basis of the story. And it was a pretty big family secret for us. And I actually uncovered it in writing this story. So I incorporated it. Yeah, I incorporated it into the story. So, but he was just a really interesting guy. I mean, he was funny, and he was, he actually trained a crow to talk. He had a pet crow that he trained to talk, and he learned to do magic tricks. And he raised rabbits. He was just a really unusual person. So I thought it would be fun to incorporate him into the story. So, and it's just, it's a mystery at heart, but there's all sorts of family drama that takes place throughout too. So
before we talk about it a little bit more, do you have a little excerpt from the book that you could read for us?
I'm going to try my best to present my reading voice here.
There we go.
So, okay. All right. You ready for it?
I'm ready for it.
Okay. Dottie. My given name was Dolores Bouchard. Everyone called me Dottie for short. I'm sure it had nothing to do with the hideous brown spot on my face that formed a perfectly round dot. Dad liked to tell this story about the day I was born. He was waiting in a little curtained-off area of the delivery room, as fathers did back then. His palms were sweaty, and he was standing because the area was too small to pace in. My mom was huffing and puffing and doing a lot of cursing on the other side of the fabric jail he was locked in. The doctor finally entered the delivery room, so Dad knew it was getting close. I was almost here, especially if Mom's mouth was any indication. The doctor was quiet as he examined Mom, but then made a sudden and unusual proclamation. No face. We got a no face. Dad said he was glad for the chair behind him because he fell into it. A nurse must have heard him drop. She pulled the curtain back to check on him. You okay, Mr. Bouchard? My kid doesn't have a face? Oh, no, that just means the baby needs to be flipped before we can deliver. Dad said that after he didn't even notice the birthmark, he was just happy I had a face. It started out the size of a small button, but as I grew, so did the dot. Now, at 11, it was roughly the circumference of my entire chin and dull brown to perfectly match the color of my drab hair. So as not to be missed, it was raised up and covered in a layer of fine hairs that resembled peach fuzz. People often referred to it as a mole, and some of the nastier kids in school called it a wart, but my mom taught me to call it a birthmark. I don't know what the difference was, but birthmark sounded a bit more sophisticated and therefore better to me. Ma also tried to tell me it was special, and I guess I usually believed her because at 11, that's what you did. You believed what your parents told you until the rest of the world started telling you differently. There really wasn't anything remarkable about that summer. It was 1970. There was a war going on in Vietnam. But in our small town in Minnesota, Tommy and I spent the days doing the kinds of regular things that two Midwest kids did when school was out and adults weren't around. It was the summer of Dottie and Tommy, Tommy and Dottie. By the end of it, I was so sick of him, I didn't care if I never saw him again. In fact, on that very day, as Mom and I talked in the kitchen, I told her not only did Tommy and I have nothing in common, I wouldn't even be sad if he died. I recall the comment very clearly because by the following summer, Tommy would be gone. Even though I thought myself to be a smart girl, I had been wrong about one thing. I did care about Tommy, especially after being stuck with him for the duration of that very long summer.
Very good. So that is the end of chapter 1 in Leaving a Mark. So I actually had no idea that part of this was autobiographical. So is Tommy based on a real cousin?
Tommy is kind of the character who is all of the little bits of your family members that you sort of don't like, that make you crazy, but that you really, really hate, but you have to love because he's your family member. Mm-hmm. So he's not a real character.
Okay.
He's probably the only one in the book that wasn't based on a real person in my life. Mm-hmm. But like I said, he's just kind of an amalgamation of all of these little like family members, and yeah. So
I find now I'm very interested in this book. I started it last night, so I'm in the middle of chapter 2. I'm not very far into it yet, because I wanted to hold the physical book when it came in, so I was waiting to get it in. So I actually started a story and over a year ago, but I was having a hard time where I was at in my story, not infusing my own life into the story, and I didn't want to infuse too much of my life into the story. Yeah. So how did you find that balance of finding family secrets and wanting to make it kind of autobiographical, but then making it fiction? How did you find a good balance for that?
That's a good question, because I struggled a little bit because I was a little worried. And when I originally told my mom that I was kind of incorporating some of these things, she was like, oh, this is not a good idea. Like, what are you thinking? You know, so I was a little nervous. But it wasn't like I was out to like make anyone really evil. And they're really, you know, there's one character I think who you're like, oh, this is the character that is really kind of not great. But then in the end, she kind of redeems herself. So, so I didn't, you know, there was that. I think that it was really just, you know, what was I striving for in the story? What was I, and I was trying to focus on this sort of grandpa mystery, which really I didn't make. That was pretty much all real, but you know, my grandpa's no longer with us. So whether or not he is happy about this, we'll never know. So, right. So there's that. You can wait until all of your family is gone and then you can write. No, but I think it was just, you know, what makes a good story? That's really what you kind of have to think about. Is this interesting? And that is kind of hard too, to step back and go, well, would a stranger think that this is interesting? You know, and I think it has to be just quirky enough to the outside person. So I would say, yes, have some strangers read it and see if they go, well, this, you know, maybe is interesting to you because you lived it, but it's not interesting to me because you know, so there's that. I don't know.
Okay. So Dottie is obviously, you said, was kind of molded after you.
Yes.
I just got done reading the bar scene in chapter 2. Did the bar scene really happen, or is that part of the fiction?
So that's kind of interesting. I did do a little bit of kind of mixing some things up into a pot and stirring them around just because I was still focused on, is this going to be interesting or not? So, so my dad actually did end up evading Vietnam. He was drafted, and he did get into a bar fight, and he did not pass the physical. But the bar fight was not what put him in a full body cast. What put him in a full body cast in real life was he was in a terrible motorcycle accident. Oh. But I thought it would be interesting to incorporate a couple of those different aspects and just put them all together. So I did some mashing around of things. Yeah.
Okay. So the book takes place in a small town. Is it called Elda? Is it Elda? Am I remembering that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Is that a real town, and is that where you grew up?
It's based on the town that I grew up in, but I didn't use the real name. Yeah.
Ah, okay. So how much of the book would you say, like percent-wise, how much is true events and then how much is not true?
Well, like I said, it's hard to say since some of it's all kind of put into a pot and stirred. So like the time frame is a little bit off. And then, some of the characters are completely made up. And obviously it didn't all happen necessarily in that way, since I just sort of uncovered my grandpa's mystery now versus when I was younger. So it's hard to say. I would say it's 50-50 probably.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, and yeah, like I said, I was going to ask you about the cover with you being on the cover. Did you know that you were going to do that from the beginning, or is that kind of a last minute decision to put yourself on the cover?
We had a couple different cover designs in mind, but I kind of did think it would be an interesting, and I had a couple of different pictures, but yeah, my cover designer is actually my husband, so that makes it interesting. So in the end, I kind of give him, he is a graphic designer, and he's actually a motion graphic designer. He's an animator.
Oh, okay.
But he has a strong art background, obviously. So I usually tell him, you go ahead and you figure out which one looks best. And so he had a couple of different ones, but that was my idea. But that was the one we went with. Yeah.
Well, you should have him make like a trailer for your book then.
Well, my biggest thing is that I really, really want him to animate one of my short stories. So I'm pushing for that.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
That'd be cool.
He actually is amazingly talented on his own, and he has several short animations that he's written himself. But so I keep writing these short stories and sort of passing them off to him. And one of these days I'm going to get him to animate one of mine. But as of yet, he's too busy sometimes too. But I also think that it just needs to be the right story for him. So yeah, he actually worked with this really fun organization that they would actually animate poems, and they called them motion poems. And I think it's the coolest idea, where they would take, it was a combination, but essentially he would get a list of poems and he would choose one, and then he animated the poem. And so I thought, well, if you can do it with a poem, you could do it with a short story, obviously. So yeah.
There you go. Just have them start with the hitch.
Yeah.
There you go. And then we'll embed it into the post.
Exactly.
That's awesome. Well, the story, as you said, is called Leaving a Mark. It just came out in January of this year, and you actually got it reviewed on Kirkus Review. And I haven't read the whole thing because I didn't know if they did any spoilers in their review, but you seem to have gotten, from the little bits and pieces I've read it, you've actually gotten a very good review from Kirkus. How was that process? Why did you decide to go to Kirkus for your second novel? And then, but what was the whole process like for that?
Well, it was kind of funny because I had never paid for a review. I'd never done anything like that before. And I just thought, I've tried every single marketing thing there is out there, and this was just like one of the last ones on the list, essentially. And I thought, that'd be kind of interesting. I think I'll just try it. And I got the review, and I was like, hey, I'm feeling pretty good about my little review. And that was literally the same day I listened to your podcast with, I'm going to screw up his name, Sylvain Nouvel.
Yes.
And heard his story about what happened to him with his Kirkus review. And it sort of crushed my spirits right there. Because his story is really, really amazing. Obviously, it was like the first thing he's written or published or whatever. And yeah. He got a movie deal like within 2 days, I think, right? And
it was quick, yeah. Yeah.
And so that's just like the dream story, but it's not really what happened to me. So yeah. So I wasn't feeling that great afterwards.
Well, we didn't mean to crush your spirits.
No, it was funny, actually. It was funny.
I actually loved Sleeping Giants, that first one. I just posted my review for Waking Gods. I
know, and I didn't read it because I'm actually in the middle of the book right now.
I don't put any spoilers in it.
Oh, you don't? Okay.
No, yeah, I try to keep my reviews as spoiler free as I can, but
okay.
You'll have to tell me what you think about it when you get done.
Yeah.
I'm a little torn on this one. So,
well, I loved the first one. That is like, oh, for me, yeah, that's like, I want to write something like that because that sort of incorporates all of the aspects of science fiction that I really, really like. So,
right. So as we said, Leaving a Mark just came out this year, and it was got a great review on Kirkus Reviews. Was it April? I'm trying to remember the date. I think it was April 5th is when they put it out. What can your fans expect from you maybe the rest of 2017?
Not much. Okay. No. I am in that sort of part of the whole process where you're now kind of focused on the marketing and I'm, like I said, I'm just starting to write something new. So 2017 is probably not going to be too exciting. Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure. I have little, it's fun as an indie author. You have these little wins along the way that feel huge because you've done it all yourself, essentially. And so my Painting the Lake was actually reviewed in our St. Paul Pioneer Press.
Oh, cool. And
it was funny because I just sent it in almost as a lark because I thought this is never going to get reviewed, but I sent it in anyway. And it took a long time. I think it was like 6 months. And it came out in the paper. I mean, they never sent me an email. I heard nothing. And my mom called me one morning, and it was right before Thanksgiving. And she said, "Your uncle just saw your book in the paper." And I said, "What?" She said, "Yeah, it's in the Pioneer Press." And so I went to the webpage and she had reviewed, it said 5 Minnesota authors to read over the long holiday weekend. And my book was there. And I was like, wow, that's crazy. And it was funny because it was the only indie book. And it said, yeah. And it said something like, publisher unknown. And I was like, yeah, that's true. But because of that, it's actually kind of blown up a little bit. And so right now, the St. Paul library systems are carrying several copies of it. And so there things like that. So then I got an offer to carry it in one of our local mystery indie book stores. It's called Once Upon a Crime, which I think is kind of a fun name. Yeah. Yeah. And so they just recently asked me if I wanted to do a talk there, which I don't know if I'm going to do that or not. But so things like that, those are the kinds of things that I'm focusing on a little bit right now, just kind of getting my name out there a little bit more. So, yeah, so that's a lot of work when you're an indie author versus, maybe having a publisher do that kind of work for you.
Yeah. That's like I said, I started Leaving a Mark, and then I have Painting the Lake right after that. Your husband did an amazing job on those covers. I mean, it looks like something that I would see in the big chain stores on the shelf in the fiction or mystery section. Especially Painting the Lake. I love that cover.
And actually a friend of ours took that photograph. It's a photograph, and then my husband kind of did some work on it too. But yeah, it's we have a lot of friends actually in Minneapolis who are really, really talented and very, very involved in the film community. And that friend of ours that took the photograph, he actually lives up north in northern Minnesota. And so, but he actually works as a cameraman for a lot of television shows and movies. And I sent him a message and I was like, do you have any photos that I could use, of a northern lake or Lake Superior? And he sent me about 100 photos, like 2 days later. So, yeah. So it's fun to have really, really talented friends and family.
Yeah. Well, since we, briefly touched on it, would you like to kind of give the non-spoiler book blurb on what Painting the Lake is about?
Sure. That's a pretty standard police procedural mystery that takes place mostly in northern Minnesota, and it does have a little bit of a Fargo feel to it, simply because that's where I'm from, and I'm trying really, really hard to not let my Minnesota accent come out as we speak. So there's that. But it's a female detective, and it sort of shifts between the female detective trying to solve this murder mystery case and her main suspect, who is a man who is just retired and goes up north and rents a little cabin on Lake Superior, and he just wants to be left alone, and he just finds himself getting into lots of trouble. So
okay. And like you said, that one's starting to get some attention. It's averaging almost 5 stars on Amazon right now, after 33 reviews, and then Leaving a Mark is averaging right around 5 stars as well with the reviews that they've gotten so far. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Well, here at the Leigendarium and 30-minute author interviews, we kind of like to end each interview with a segment that we call the legendary ending. And if you've listened to it, you know that they're kind of book-related, not book-related questions. The first one is, what songs are currently on your writing playlist?
Oh, I'm one of those people who cannot listen to music while I'm writing.
Okay.
It's too distracting, I think, because I'm a lyric person too. So my husband always makes fun of me because I know every lyric to every song. And so that means I pay a lot of attention and listen to the words. And so if I was really, really listening to music, then I wouldn't be able to actually write words, I think. So I'm a silent writer.
That works.
Mm-hmm.
The next question is, if you were stuck in a zombie apocalypse, which one of your book characters would you want to be stuck with, and why?
No.
Which is interesting, since some of your characters are based on family.
Yeah, right. I'm not going to say the one that I think I should. It'd probably be my detective character, Nancy Simmons, since, she's kind of a tough cookie.
Okay.
I think she could protect me, yeah.
That works. Now, if you could pick any character from any media source to be stuck in a zombie apocalypse with, who would it be and why?
Oh, boy. Well, I have to say it would probably have to be Glenn from The Walking Dead, because once Glenn died, I was out. That was my big thing. I was like, Glenn, he was my character on the show that I really, really loved, because he was fast and he still kind of kept a sense of humor until he was terribly smashed to bits. But we won't talk about that. So, yeah.
So we'll go with Glenn.
Mm-hmm.
The next one is, if you had a time machine, where would you travel and why?
Oh, boy. A time machine. Well, let's see. That's a tough one. Where would I travel? I guess maybe, I don't know why, but I really, really like the sort of 20s and 30s. Like, I don't know why I would really want to go back to the Great Depression era, but I guess that for some reason I really like that time period. So I think it would also be really interesting to sort of, be able to spy on some of your family members, like that were generations before you, just to get a good feel of where you came from and why you ended up the way that you did. So I think something along those lines.
Okay. And if you had one superpower, what would it be and why?
Oh, superpower. That's another hard one. I guess it would probably be mind reader, because I'm kind of nosy.
There we go. That works. The question that we're famous for, and now you're going to be a part of, is a penguin walks through the door right now wearing a sombrero. What does he say and why is he here?
My penguin would definitely ask where the tacos are, because he would be a northern penguin. And I was looking this up because I was like, why don't we have any northern penguins? It's obviously the climate is right for them. And I found out, which I thought was interesting, that there was a version of the penguin that was called the great auk. That was a northern relative of the penguin. And so this penguin, he was the last sole surviving great auk, and he somehow managed to get himself down south, and he put the sombrero on so that he would blend in with the southern penguins, and he just went in search of some good tacos, because when you're from the north, you really don't have good tacos.
That works. And for those that don't know, we're actually doing a giveaway with this episode, and part of it is a penguin wearing a sombrero that you made.
Yeah.
How did you do that? Like, did you find a pattern for that, or did you just freehand that?
I did find a pattern, but I'm really, really bad at sticking to directions. So I kind of used it as a basis, and then I kind of went off on a tangent like I tend to do. So it's a little combination of the pattern and me going, no, I don't really like that part. I'm going to change it a little bit. So yeah.
They turned out amazing. So thank you. Thank you for making those. They're absolutely amazing.
I was actually hoping that you were going to ask me what's the weirdest thing that I've had to do research-wise recently, because it was going to be, I Google searched how to crochet a penguin with a sombrero.
That's hilarious. How did you get into crocheting?
I think that when my grandma passed, her spirit inhabited my body, and she forced me to take over her crocheting obsession, because my grandma was the crafty one, and I was crafty, but I used to do a lot of quilting, like modern quilting, not like grandma quilting. And it is a little strange, because when my grandma passed, I had never had any interest in crocheting before, and all of a sudden I was just like, I think I'm going to learn to crochet. And one day I just started watching some YouTube videos, and I started crocheting, and I really have no idea, other than my grandma was, has something to do with it. That is my only explanation for it, because I have no idea.
Well, there we go. The penguin turned out amazing, and I've seen you did a giveaway the other week where you gave away your book with was it a quilt you made? Not a quilt.
An Afghan
that you made. Yeah. Which was really cool. And
I made some sheep for another writer friend who is putting out a book, and her main character is a sheep farmer. And she asked me if I could crochet her some sheep. And so that was how the penguin came about, right?
Yeah,
because I had posted my sheep, and you were like, oh, now I'm going to need a penguin. And I thought, oh, that's a good idea. And that's kind of how I like to work, just from one thing to the next. If it pops into my head, okay, sure, I'll make that. Yeah. So that was kind of funny.
It turned out great. I have it on my bookcase right now. Still coming up with a name for it, but we will come up with one. And then before we leave, do you have any advice, whether it be for writing or for life, that you would like to share with our listeners?
Oh, geez. I guess I would just say, if you have an interest in something, just keep practicing and keep working on it, because I know with crafts and in writing, I kind of use the same concept, which is just to keep doing it and throw the ones away that aren't good, or take it apart and restitch it, or revise until you end up with something that is decent. So yeah, it's all about just stick with it.
Sounds good. And then where can our listeners go if they would like to learn more about you or your books?
They can go to my Facebook page, which is, I think it's just author Jody Wenner. I don't know. And I also have an Amazon page, obviously, that you can look up. Jody Wenner. I'm not sure what the address is for it, but
we will put links to them over in the show notes at Leigendarium.com.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, we'll have links for that. If you want to see the picture of the penguin that you can win, that's going to be over there as well.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for taking time out of your day and coming on 30-minute author interviews. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
It was.
Well, everybody, that is all the time that we have for this week's episode of 30-Minute Author Interviews. Thank you so much for tuning in, and make sure you tune in next Wednesday and every Wednesday for another great episode. And don't forget to head on over to Leigendarium.com and check out the show notes where you can find this week's giveaway, where Jody Wenner is giving away a signed copy of both of her novels, Leaving a Mark and Painting the Lake. And you can also win the crocheted penguin wearing a sombrero that Jody made. And while you're at the show notes, you can also visit our sponsor, The Galactic Satori Chronicles by Nick Breaker and Paul E. Hicks. And don't forget, you can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Google Play, or YouTube. Never miss another episode of 30-Minute Author Interviews. I would also like to thank a few of our Patreon supporters. I would like to thank Nick Breaker, Diane S. Loftus, Third Scribe, and Maggie Stewart Grant. They're supporting 30-Minute Author Interviews through Patreon. They're also receiving the Patreon-only podcast 10 Questions With. Visit patreon.com/Leigendarium and find out how you can support 30-Minute Author Interviews as well. And until next time, guys, remember to stay legendary.
Oh, screwed that one up. Blooper reel.